very much. Thank you very Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Andreas. And as Andreas said, yes, welcome to the Rotary Club of New York, #6, Host Club of America. Unfortunately, we're still having remote broadcasts. We normally would have this breakfast at the United Nations. I must tell you, the smoked Irish salmon this morning is particularly good. So I'm sorry you cannot be here with us in person. But in any event, thank you for logging in. Thank you for joining our Zoom breakfast. We're honored today to have as our guest Natalie Hahn, who is the founder of the Malaika Foundation, Nebraska, former United Nations official. She told me she is now a dyed-in-the-wool Nebraskan, although she was a New York resident for a while. And I said, once you're a New Yorker, you're always a New Yorker. But I stood corrected. She said, no, I'm a true Nebraskan. But in any event, I'm going to hand this over to the chair of our International Breakfast Committee, Malaika Foundation herself, former career official, United Nations. So good morning, Malaika. Would you please do us the honors and introduce our guest this morning?
Yes, with pleasure. So I have the pleasure to introduce Natalie Hahn, the ambassador of Nebraska to the world, a fellow Rotarian, and my best friend. Natalie is the quintessential international civil servant. She has worked 38 years in the United Nations system in various programs. In many places, I think she started in Rome at 24 years old in FAO and on to the field in Nigeria, Ethiopia, UNICEF representative in Malawi, and also at headquarters in New York. She worked in 3, I think, or 4 organizations, including FAO, the International Fund for Agricultural Development in Rome, and in UNICEF, of course, and also at the United Nations. When Bill Gates gave all that money to the UN, she was senior advisor, senior private sector advisor at the UN, UN's Fund for International Partnerships. While in Nigeria, Natalie encouraged local artists by providing them with paint she bought in London, thus launching yet another adventure, that of patron of the arts in various African countries where she worked. Natalie recently returned to her beloved Nebraska, determined to give back to her state by founding the Malaika Foundation, which has a mission to build a greater understanding of peoples and countries throughout the world and to enhance global education in Nebraska schools and communities. She was in New York, a member of our club. Upon moving to Lincoln, Natalie joined the downtown Lincoln Rotary Club #14. Natalie has an impressive educational background, including a master's in public administration, and also a doctoral degree in education from Harvard University. Dr. Natalie Hahn loves Nebraska, and Nebraska loves her back. She received the 2020 Sower Award in the Humanities. The Sower Award is presented annually to an individual who has made a significant contribution to public understanding of the humanities in Nebraska. Natalie, thank you for accepting to be with us today, this morning. And as the ambassador of Nebraska, I would love to hear from you.
Malaika, thank you so much. And good morning, New York Rotary, and a special greetings from Nebraska. I'm here and you can see our beautiful state capitol behind me. And what a joy to be with you and Malika, thank you, my great UNICEF friend. Andreas, for 22 years of leadership in New York Rotary. And I was so pleased to see Helene, that I haven't seen for many years, and my Nebraska, my United Nations and Harvard friends online. Today is about global education and why is it so important for Nebraska? And I'm going to be giving you 6 different reasons why the Malaika Foundation and I believe it's extraordinarily important. So the question is, how did this all begin? Well, my mother, a journalist, on one trip back to Nebraska, looked at me and she said, honey, I love what you're doing for Africa, but what are you doing for Nebraska? And I think it's time to give back. And with that encouragement, we would go to schools. The schools would have these old-fashioned pull-down maps, and there would still be Rhodesia. And we would always ask the high school kids, well, how many countries are there in Africa? Well, once in a while, someone would come up with 3 or 4, but that's about it. So the geography is one part of Malaika, but Malaika means my angel in Swahili, as you know, the language of Kenya and Tanzania. It was actually founded 23 years ago. And during that period, we have had 3,500 teachers attend workshops. We provide resources. We bring in national speakers. And we've also had, with some great donor funding, 68 teachers to travel abroad. Why is Malaika? Why is global education important for Nebraska? Number one, you know, we're a different state now. The demography is completely different. There are 100 languages spoken in Lincoln and Omaha, our largest cities. We have also a very, very strong rural population. It's about 30 to 40% rural. We also have towns like Lexington, like Schuyler, where 60% of the people are Hispanic, and that's because of our meat packing industry. There are great jobs there. Number two, agriculture. We're a farm state. Our exports are soybeans, beef, and just really wonderful exports primarily to China, to Canada, and to Mexico. So one of the initiatives that we have taken with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln is the World Food Prize Youth Institute. And high school students write an essay. They write an essay about an agricultural theme, the country of their choice. Then they come to the university, they present those speeches. And what's interesting about this is usually for these kids, it's the first time that they have ever done a public statement. So the public speaking experience is very good. It's the second time they've ever done any research on a country. And we have wonderful results. We usually have 40 to 50 kids that come in, usually with their parents or with teachers. The winners of that contest then go on to the World Food Prize Conference in Des Moines, Iowa. That conference is the largest in the world for agriculturalists. It was founded by Kenneth Quinn, and it honors Norman Borlaug, our wonderful Nobel Peace Prize winner for his outstanding research on wheat. Now, why is this important? Because my interest also was diversifying agriculture. We can't stay with the corn and the soybeans, although they've done very well, but they're expensive crops to grow. And Malika forgot to mention that I'm a farm kid, that my sister and I still own a farm. My cousin has a bison ranch, so farming is very important. So we've been looking at strategies of other crops, other possibilities for farmers to make more money. And one interesting one is teff, which is a very nutritious crop from Ethiopia and actually looks very, very good for Nebraska. The third reason for Malaika is that when we say to our teachers going abroad, you know, you're a Nebraska ambassador now, and you have to know about your own state. You have to know the history, you have to know some of the outstanding leaders. So we've had the opportunity, for instance, to work with the Pawnee tribe out of Oklahoma and Nebraska. Now they're an interesting tribe, and what they have found are a multitude of crops that do very well that they didn't remember, that they didn't know about. So we work with the University of Nebraska on this. And I want to tell you, one of the stalks has 7 ears of corn. So it's been really a thrill to work with them. Secondly, we try as much as we can to get great books about the world into Nebraska schools. But what we found that there were not a lot of books for kids. And with the advice of our educator colleagues, they said, you know, the fourth grade is really the grade to target. So we were able to get enough funding to do one book, and that book is about a very famous Nebraskan, and that's Standing Bear, Chief Standing Bear, a famous Ponca chief. And in the Great Hall of the US Congress, he has a beautiful statue, as does Maurice Sandoz, a really wonderful, wonderful author from Nebraska. The fourth reason is really for Malaika and for our teachers to identify new partners, to get resources. So we've reached out to Reach the World, and this is a wonderful group out of New York City. And what they do is to connect international travelers, particularly fellowship holders of the Gilman Fellowship, which is funded by the State Department, and they're connected with Nebraska high schools. And what's been interesting about this, as we bring in these international travelers into these high schools, immediately the immigrant kids, the new Nebraskans, as we call them, say, you know, I have my own story to tell. And you should also understand that Nebraska is the home for the largest population in America of the Hasidis and the South Sudanese. So there's a whole influx of a lot of new Nebraskans that are coming in. And we know that once a teacher travels abroad, their entire perspective of that classroom and those immigrants completely change. The other groups that we work with are the Foreign Policy Association, which has a great one-week course on great decisions training every year in New York, and they finance this. And you know very well the Asia Society and also the International Institute of Education. Both have phenomenal resources on fellowships, on travel abroad, connecting with schools worldwide, and they have been long-term partners. The fifth reason is that we want our kids to get great jobs internationally. You know, 70% of the irrigation equipment shipped abroad comes from Nebraska. We have great companies. We love Warren Buffett. Berkshire Hathaway is worldwide. It has 360,000 employees. The businesses come back to us and they say, we need young people with languages. We need young people that know about different regions. So again, employment is a key factor for our work. Lastly, and the sixth is that we need to travel abroad. Now, during COVID, Malaika, like all of us, have not funded, we have not organized any international trips. In fact, the statistic appears to be that in the last 2 years, there has been a 53% drop of international traveling by college students in America. So Malaika's taken a bit of a different turn. We went to one of our major donors and we said, look, we can't travel to Botswana or not even to Washington, DC, but let's see Nebraska. So we have the travel planned for this spring for several schools with new adventures in your home state. Now, how does all of this lead to African art? Well, I lived 14 years in Africa. And when I was in Nigeria, this was in 1982, I found that, you know, the artists were just phenomenal, but they had no supplies. So I arranged for a wonderful art supply store to give me a lot of paints, a lot of canvases, and British Airways, bless their soul, wouldn't charge me to ship it to Lagos on unaccompanied baggage. But of course, I ended up buying a lot of that art because once those artists had those supplies, they did beautiful pieces, and you'll see a couple of those. Also, it's allowed me to give art to some of our cities with a very large African-American population, like North Omaha, which has 25%. So I've worked with some wonderful groups there. One is No More Empty Pots. Don't you just love that title? It's culinary arts. It's about using local foods. It's about training. It's about entrepreneurship. No More Empty Pots has given thousands of meals these last 2 years. Another is Girls Inc., and they work with young girls in North Omaha, particularly for daycare, for the families, and financial literacy, physical fitness, and nutrition. Now, if you want to go dancing in an African style, you don't have to go to Abidjan or Lagos, you can come to Nebraska because we have a great group called the African Culture Connection. The director and the founder is from Benin. He's a member of the Malaika Foundation, Charles Avosi. And he has this big group of artists, of dancers that he trains. Most are Americans, and they go out to rural schools and they dance and they drum. So it's not just the dancing, but it's also bringing a positive aspect of the African culture. So on the 9th of July this year, you're very welcome because Malaika has given the African Culture Connection about 50 pieces of art, which we will be auctioning. Another one is the Leadership African Summit, which is a really wonderful conference. It's organized each year to bring together African Americans and Africans on the investment potential. So let's make believe you're just in Nebraska, and with Andreas's work, we're going to shift into some of the art that I have given. And one of the great things that's just happened recently is that I was able to completely furnish the only Ethiopian restaurant in Lincoln with Ethiopian art. And then last month, I gave an icon from Ethiopia that I purchased 51 years ago to a Greek Coptic church in Lincoln. And they were absolutely thrilled because it's a church with a very large Ethiopian congregation. So we move on, Andreas, now to African art, and I'll give you a little explanation quickly. One of my favorite groups in all of Africa is a Mapula embroidery group out of South Africa. Now, these are women who are HIV positive. They design, they make these, and they're absolutely gorgeous. And I think I've given away about 50 of these, and they're always a great hit. And it's usually safari or it's botanical scenes. Thank you. Of course, batiks, this is from Zimbabwe, and these gifts have been very popular, particularly for schools, you know, a little safari theme. Most of these have come from Zimbabwe. This is another Mapula. This is the botanical scene. And again, they have now set up a new endeavor of Mapula in Zambia. This is a great artist from South Africa, and it's a series of 4 on safari animals. It's done with oil on wood. A Senegalese artist, and I love the design and the action of all of this. And this is one of the paintings that we're giving to Doane University, where we've established a large collection to honor Doug Christensen, who's been in education for 63 years in Nebraska, and he's the chairman of our board of the Malaika Foundation. This is an artist from Namibia, and it's a pastel, but it beautifully shows women, and they're at a maternity health center. My favorite artist, Afewerk Tekle, who's Ethiopian. Now, Afewerk is the only African artist that is shown in the Uffizi in Florence. And he also has some wonderful paintings at the African Art Museum at the Smithsonian in Washington, DC. This is another of the Mapulas, which is very popular, of the safari animals. And there's another wonderful place. This is in Malawi. It's the Kungoni Art and Cultural Center. It was established 50 years ago by a Jesuit priest from Canada. And he's an anthropologist as well as a priest. And he has taught hundreds of boys carving, and they just do extraordinary work. Again, a place where I've taken a lot of carving supplies to them. This is Twin 77 from Nigeria. He's another African artist who is shown in the African Museum of the Smithsonian. Now you may wonder, well, why Twin 77? What a name. And he's from Ogbomoso, but it so happens that the Yoruba people have the highest rate of twins in the world. And he is the 7th twin of the same parents. But his work is extraordinary. This is a piece that we've given to the World Food Prize Conference in Des Moines, Iowa. Nigerian piece with thousands and thousands of shells, just intricately done. It took this young artist so long to do it, but it's just a beautiful piece. This is one of the pieces by the artist that received those supplies from London, and he was so extraordinary. And this is one of the pieces also that will be sold in July in Omaha at that auction with the African Culture Connection. Well, that's the end of that collection. But before I end, I just want to make sure who's online in terms of some of my Malaika board members, because I want to stress to you that none of this could be done without extraordinary assistance of a beautiful board, a really dedicated board. And over the years, I've had excellent members. Funding, one of our main funding sources is Fund for Teachers out of Texas. And we had 2 different art sales, one at Joslin Museum in Omaha, one at the Quilt House in Lincoln. They actually gave us matching money for all the funds raised. About $147,000 was raised then to support high school teachers. Thomas Reeves is with us, and he's the coordinator of the art collection at Doane University. I'm very happy that he's here. Okay. And Joanne Vennick, a wonderful demographer from the United Nations. Kelly King, Assistant Vice Chancellor of the University of Nebraska and a member of the Malaika Board. Okay. In closing, and before we open to questions, I would just like to say thank you to Rotary. I've worked with Rotary in so many African countries. And for the United Nations, there is no better partner. When I brought thousands of pencils and notebooks to Malawi after a new democratic government, it was Rotary that distributed them. Now, polio is almost over with the exception of just the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan, but that's really not only due, of course, to Bill Gates and 250 million, but it's due to Rotarians who are on the ground eradicating polio. You are a great partner. I also want to say how great it is to be home. Having lived abroad for so many years and in New York for 20, and I love New York, Mr. President Gerard, but I am happy to be home. I'm a farm kid. We love farming. That's what our family does. And I'm only thrilled that through Malaika, we can try to make those kids' world a little larger. We can ensure that they know more about the world, that they can travel outside of the state, for which many of them in our rural schools have never had the opportunity to do. But I also want to ask you, do you think I fulfilled my mother's wish when she said, honey, you better do something for Nebraska? So with that, I want to just say what a privilege it is to be with you, how proud I am to have been a Rotarian for many, many years, and to thank you for the opportunity to be with great members of my former club in New York City. And it's just been wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. I think you have really fulfilled your mother's wish.
Thank
Malaika is an incredible organization, and it is exactly what a UNICEF, a United Nations civil servant, I mean international civil servant, who has served in foreign countries, has to bring back to their own country. And you have this exchange of cultures, exchange of experiences that make globalization a reality. Because it is upon us. I mean, the world is going global. It's a village, and we're all part of it, and we better learn about each other. So, and I'm so proud of being your friend. And
thank you. Well, thank you,
the
Melissa.
floor is open to questions.
Okay, I don't see anyone in the chat room yet. Yes, good morning, Zach Rawlings. Glad to see you here with us this morning. Natalie, thank you so much for at least making us aware of the fact that Nebraska is far more diverse than at least I thought it was. For those Americans who have not done so, that if you have not driven across the United States, you really cannot, in my opinion, you cannot appreciate how absolutely huge the United States is. I mean, it's bigger than all of Europe combined, and it's very diverse. And so you could go from one place to another place, and it's almost in some ways like traveling from one country to another. My question for you this morning, Natalie, is so I think what you're doing with students in Nebraska is extremely commendable. How many students have you been able to reach out to? Has Malaika been able to reach?
Well, it's hard to put an exact figure, but I would say thousands, because it's not just about giving the larger gifts of art. It's also encouraging different donors to give books to the schools, particularly in the schools where you have a high immigrant population. For instance, in the town where I used to live in Central City, my sister and I gave 2 beautiful carvings of giraffes. And so we had a name calling contest for all the kids in the primary school. What should you call the giraffe? What's the history? Where is it from? So there were a lot of those smaller incentives. And what we've also done to encourage teachers, and I've given a lot of the mapulas and other smaller pieces of African art to the outstanding global educators who have made a difference. And we do special awards to them. We recognize them. There's a multitude of Nebraska educational associations where we honor these people. So the real, I think the challenge has been reaching the rural ranching areas. It's easy for Omaha and Lincoln, and I'm living in Lincoln now, but our goal has always been to go out to Scotts Bluff, which is right next to the Wyoming border. So it's always been an effort. Lexington, for instance, where you have a 70% Hispanic rate. And so I've given Central American art there. But luckily, really thousands, but also with an encouragement of the local leaders. And what we need to do more of, and we're just beginning this now, is a lot more work with the local businesses to encourage them, particularly the international businesses, to work more closely with the teachers traveling abroad, and also to give educational supplies to the kids. One of the favorite gifts, of course, for kids that we've given hundreds is National Geographic for kids, National Geographic. And what's been amazing to me when I go to schools like Clinton and North Star and Lincoln that has a high immigration rate, they simply didn't have books about the world. And God forbid that you should ask for a globe. It just, people don't have globes anymore. So globes are a great gift to see the world, how many continents, how many countries in Africa. So that's also been a favorite award, but it's really fun to see the reactions of the kids, but also, and this is something that has really helped the teachers a lot, is how do you bring in the immigrant kids and the immigrant community into the school system? And how can we have our Nebraska kids better understand their culture? North Omaha is economically stressed, but the whole talents of these new immigrants coming in is phenomenal. So it's that stretching out and trying to mix and blend. And Kelly King, who's the Assistant Chancellor of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, in charge of working with student affairs, may like to add to this, because she works very closely with educators. And also the other thing is encouragement for Nebraska universities to bring in more international students. And again, University of Nebraska Kearney has done very well on this. Interestingly enough, the state colleges, the community colleges have done very well. Kelly, anything more on this, reaching out to our students that we've done? Kelly's been a board member for many years.
Yes, thank you. And it's so nice to be with everyone. I used to attend Columbia University, so I definitely love New York City. I'd love to add, Dr. Natalie Hahn, that there has been closer to about 10,000 that you've probably affected, because I do believe that you may not be including all of the state colleges. And there's also opportunities that she's hosted for many years for pre-service teachers. to learn a lot more about how to incorporate in their curricula global education. And so really before they're even teachers, an opportunity to learn how do I integrate intercultural and global minded ideas so that when they become a teacher, they're ready for that. So I think that was also an initiative that had taken place several years ago. So she's just done incredible work in our state for the world and has been just a phenomenal representative of humanity. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. Zach Rawlings has a question.
Thank
Zach?
you, Natalie. Let me just first say, I was originally a Midwesterner, and now that I live in Manhattan, but I grew up in Ohio, another Midwest flyover state, as they unfortunately sometimes refer to the middle of the country. But so I had a question about kind of farming and farmland and agriculture. Apologies. I'm on the, I'm a financial advisor to wealthy people, and I'm noticing, apologies, I'm noticing a trend lately where a lot of my clients are buying large swaths of farmland for no other reason, no interest in farming or agriculture, but just it's a good investment and acting as kind of landlords. So they're leasing it back to these farmers. And I read that, you know, Bill Gates, a friend of Rotary, but is the largest single landholder of farmland with something like 250,000 acres. My concern is, as a citizen and a human and an American, is I just see, you know, it harkens back to when I was in grade school and we learned about sharecropping and everything. With a quarter of agriculture representing the economy of Nebraska, what have you seen as far as, have you seen some of the impacts of this, I think, a massive trend of private ownership of farmland? And if so, what do you think some of the implications or consequences are?
Zach, I'm really glad you brought up this question, because as a farmer in a farm family who's inherited land, it's a sad scenario. It used to be that Ted Turner was by far the largest landowner in Nebraska. It's now Bill Gates. Now, with all respect to both gentlemen who've been phenomenal contributors to the United Nations, it saddens me because we're losing our family farms. You know, it's difficult enough when you have machinery that costs up to $200,000, $300,000. You're not making enough money. And just a few weeks ago, I was with one of my cousins who owns a lot of farmland. And he said, you know, Natalie, if I break even, I'll be lucky. So unfortunately, this is a scenario we think may continue, but I hope we can look at diversification of cropping, because I think there's a great potential, and there is some of it being done, but I don't think nearly enough. But it's a very worrisome area. I think more attention should be given to this by our congressional delegation, by our entire delegation of politicians in the state of Nebraska, because we want those farm families to remain. We want those kids to remain on the farm. It's hard enough to keep them on the farms the way it is, let alone thinking they're not going to be making enough money. But thanks for bringing up the concern. And again, we work very closely. There's a lot of great farmers organizations in the state, Farmers Union, Farm Bureau, but we need to do more about keeping Nebraska for Nebraskans and people that are farming.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Zach. That's a great point. Natalie, we Rotary Club of New York here, we're planning on having conversations with the new chancellor for the Department of Education in New York City. And I was wondering if you could send us some outlines, some literature of what Malaika Foundation is, you know, in print in doing in Nebraska, because I think some of what you're doing is certainly needs to be replicated in places like New York, where we have, as you know, probably the greatest immigrant population of anywhere in the world. My own personal experience with the Department of Education in New York City, it does not satisfy the needs of literally, you know, somewhere between 100 and 200 different immigrant groups in our public schools here in New York City. So anything you could send us, I think, could serve as a model for places like New York City. It sounds like what you're doing is really a great service to the people in Nebraska.
Well, we would be happy to do that. And you know, I think the challenge we've had also sometimes is the university system not providing enough funds for the students to travel abroad.
Yes.
So we have to reach out. We have to reach out ourselves to private businesses. They don't have any problems fundraising for football,
Mhm.
but so we need to work a lot harder. And that's one key thing for all the university systems, is to, first of all, take a look at how many students are traveling abroad. Of course, a lot more are going to go abroad in New York City than Nebraska, but how many are traveling abroad? The international student population has really diminished because of COVID, and to take another look at that and what those nationalities are. Before we go on and for other questions, I just want to recognize Joseph Klee, because he introduced me and was my nominating officer for Rotary New York. Thank you, Joseph. It's nice to have you with us. And Mary Hani, a wonderful Lebanese American friend, is online with us. She's written 9 books on women's empowerment in Arabic, French, and English, and just a phenomenal global leader for women.
And Natalie, I had written in the chat that I have a question for you. So before I ask my question, first, I'm so inspired and impressed by what you're doing. And the reason why I'm inspired and impressed is because of the intersections of in your work of education and art, education and business, education and globalization, education and perspectives from other continents such as Africa. So what you're doing is expanding the definition of education and expanding it in a way that allows teachers and students to understand that education is not just only the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but it's really everything. It's how we connect with other countries. It's how we understand other cultures. It's how we are becoming a village, a global village. And you're doing that. Malaika, your organization that you created with this wonderful name of Angels, is doing that. So my question to you is, which touches a bit on what Gerald was saying earlier, and I wrote in the chat before even Gerald said it that I want to ask a question. How can we replicate what you're doing? How can we allow Malaika to become a role model of influencing state by state by state by state, the educational system, to stretch the minds of the students and to stretch the imagination of the students in order to understand better other cultures. And understanding better other cultures is the priority of the future. You're doing it in Nebraska, and you're doing it in the most wonderful way. How can we replicate it?
May, thank you so much. You know, I think it's very important that we reach primary school kids.
Yes.
And I know we've had Interact, which has been more for high school and been on hold in a lot of the states because of COVID. But I would love having more, I will call you all Rotary ambassadors, to make the effort to go out, to your hometown schools.
Yeah.
And to see what they're doing and to see how you can do to help, and to connect with schools in your home states, in your hometowns, wherever you might be from, and to provide books, provide educational supplies. So I think that's the key thing in terms of Rotarians being better ambassadors to younger kids and kids at primary and middle schools. The second area is to invite more immigrants into Rotary meetings. I mean, look at Lebanon. Lebanon, in your wonderful country, is in a state of real crises.
Yeah.
But what do Americans know about this? The news is very scant, as it is on Ethiopia. So I think inviting Ethiopians in, inviting Lebanese in, but the Lebanese clubs in Rotary are doing phenomenal work. We have, for instance, Ron Farrar, who's a good friend in Lebanon. And I think what my club has done, which has been a really great thing, is that they take about 2 minutes at every club meeting on Zoom, and they connect with a Rotarian internationally. And that's such an easy thing to do now, but it's something we never did. And then what happens when they connect, we have a Nigerian colleague I see doing the chat, Dr. George, hello. But what you could do is to connect with your Nigerian members and then with Lagos. So that kind of a connection is very important. And I think on the projects we support internationally, what I've been surprised about is that oftentimes we don't work collaboratively with the Rotarian clubs and people in country. I mean, Rotary is very, very prominent in Africa. I mean, there are 3 Rotarian clubs in Malawi, and I was a member of one. And the interesting point about it, it was the only place as a UNICEF representative where I could reach the British and the Lebanese and the Malawian businessmen, because I couldn't do it individually. But once I came into Rotary, they were all there. So I think that's the second point. The third is to take a look of how we can sort of revive this Interact in the high school programs. And I know that it's been tough, but those would be some of the 3 suggestions that I would like to make.
Thank you.
Thank you, May. I have 3 questions here. George, I think, was the first, Tom, McConnell, and Francis. So George, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Natalie, for this beautiful presentation. It kind of jogs my memory when you mentioned Nebraska, because I went to school in Marshalltown, Iowa, when I came in 1981. And I recall that most of our foreign student paperwork through immigration was processed in Nebraska then. And also, Marshalltown, Iowa was a small town community, rural, very rural. The only job we could get then was to detassel the corn. And I was familiar with the farm and John Deere and all of that. Eventually, I was able to get a job at a pizza place. I was making $2 an hour and can only work about 2 hours a day. But, it's really very important. What I think I get from your presentation is the importance of travel, culture, and the art, because with those, we can get to understand ourselves better, love one another more, because one of the things we have in this world is we are constantly fighting. We don't have the opportunity to relate to one another as the same, part of the same humanity. And we just want to thank you for the presentation. And I still look forward to visiting Iowa again after I left and moved to New York in 1983. And then you mentioned about the art from Lagos and so on. Yeah, I would really want to speak with you at some point, because I have 2 other friends that are, that paint, that might probably want to donate 1 or 2 things for your community. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, George.
I just have to respond to this because Nigeria is such a great country. Are you Yoruba or Igbo, George?
I'm Igbo.
You're Igbo. Okay. Well, this thing of detasseling corn, because when you're growing up, detasseling corn is about the only farm job that you can get. And I think I got about maybe 50 cents an hour, but I appreciate all of your hard work there. But I'm admiring your back walls with the art, but I also love Nigeria because, I'm a chief of the Yoruba. I'm Falasha de Arike, the Belungani Yalaje. And it was one of the nicest honors because it was my work with introducing soybeans with the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. But I have to tell you, it was such an honor. The chiefs came in and they said, well, we have to watch your work for 1 year. And then on the day of when you become a chief, which was a 3-day celebration, we will give you your title. So the day came, the Belungani Yalaje, which in Yoruba means the person who empowers. So what could be better than that? It was just a great honor. And I'm still in touch with so many Nigerians. I look forward to being in touch with you about some of this art as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And then I saw Tom and Francis. Thank you,
Yes.
Natalie.
Good morning, Malika. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. It's so nice to see you after all these years. We missed you so much, Natalie.
Oh,
and
thank
you're doing great things. And Lincoln's gain was our loss. You were so generous to our club. I remember you would host a lot of our meetings at your lovely apartment. Somehow you got 300,000 books sent to, I think it was Liberia with the UN during that year. And
That's a,
You were always so kind to our piano player, Audrey, who's a member now of the Rotary Club of New York, if you remember her.
I do.
The piano, yes. So it's very, very nice to see you. You look terrific. And
Thank you.
I think I have a little gray hair now from the last time. Before I
Oh,
didn't
no,
have gray hair.
I think you're looking very handsome, but I'm so glad that you brought this up because this
I am,
answers.
you're certainly missing. I was so pleased to see that you were going to be a guest speaker and to get the chance to see you again.
Well, you have to come to Nebraska, Tom. This
Well,
is your next. Okay,
you know what?
said
I'll
it's
tell you a
about-
little secret between the late Sylvie and Barney, and
Yeah.
me. When we would have lunch with you, we would always try to get to talk about the bison farm that your family was associated with, because we've met a lot of economists, we met a lot of doctors, but we didn't know any ranchers, and we would love when we get you to talk about the ranch a little bit, or I think it was your sister's, a cousin's ranch or something. But we were always really impressed that you were raising bison in Kansas or something, or Nebraska.
Thank you.
So you were very missed.
Thank you. Well, I have to say, I really appreciate your comment because it responds also to May, because what we did when I was a member of the club is we sent 300,000 books to Liberia. It was just
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And
Wow.
Books for Africa is just a phenomenal. They have sent 40
Absolutely.
million books in French and in English to Africa. And they do just great work. They're based out of Minneapolis. And
Yeah.
I remember the president, Dr. Sirleaf, telling me that when these books came in, the only place the kids could find some light would be with the street lamps. So they would go out and read these books and read.
Wow, fascinating.
So again, Rotary, in terms of doing something internationally made, Books for Africa is one of the
Yes.
best.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Tom, I just want to add that I'm glad to see you're not living in your truck anymore.
It's economic recovery.
Good to hear it.
Okay, great. Francis, you have a question, and then Scarlett.
Thank you, Malaika. Natalie, this is Francis. I'm a refugee from Southern Sudan. I live here in Los Angeles, California. Yeah, I just want to thank you for the presentations, and especially Nebraskan for welcome our refugees, Southern Sudanese. The Southern Sudanese in Nebraska, actually, what I have seen, they have been contributed very positively, especially in the mid process. And last year, 2019, we have a big conference over there, hosted by more than 600 Southern Sudanese, and I can see the improvement in our children, and especially in 2021, there's a lot of kids went to the universities in Nebraska universities and around the United States. And we say that this is the benefit of migration, especially in this country for welcoming Southern Sudanese people. But as the fathers of those immigrants here in the United States, also we don't forget our country back home. And we feel that we are fortunate to be here in the United States, but our home is suffering. The hunger is wrapping all over the country. And as you say about the land process, we have a lot of challenges about the land process. All those companies, the corporate companies, international corporate companies, they went to Southern Sudan and then they bought a huge lands, and then they keep those lands without being used, you know. And then the farmers they have a challenges to find the lands. So we have an organization called BC Global. We try to fund the farmers. So like each farmer, we give them 1 acre to use it for their products. So, but the problem here, mostly we find challenges to get some tractors and other equipment for the farms. This is one of our challenges here. But to cope with those corporations is very challenging, because the corporations sometimes come behind the government, and then the government get the money from those corporations, and then they become challenges contributing hunger into the country. So we just pray for that. But our mission, actually, we just say that we'll keep our farmers, but we salute for you. We pray for you that some other NGOs can come and support our organization with tractors and agricultural equipment. And also in regard to the educations, in 2020, we opened a huge door for the students, especially those who are orphan in Southern Sudan. And we find a challenge, a great number of the students need support. This year we came out with a resolution to reduce it to the girls because girls became the victims.
Mm.
Most of the girls, when they reached 15, and they became pregnant.
Mm.
So we focus on the girls. And also at the same
Okay.
time here, when the girls graduated, they have a challenge to get a sponsorship to go outside to study in universities.
Mm.
So I don't know if Nebraska can open the chance for the Southern Sudanese girls in Southern Sudan can have the scholarship for them to come and study in Nebraska. And I think our community, they're ready to sponsor them and even to help them to host them in their houses. So again, I say that thank you for your presentations about the work arts, which is great things. And thank you, Rotary New York. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis.
Natalie, unmute yourself.
Thank you for your comments. I want to tell you that the Southern Sudanese in Nebraska are phenomenal. They're contributors to the state. They're great workers. Most of them are employed in the meat packing industry. A lot of them are now coming into the schools. In terms of specific fellowships for South Sudanese, I don't know of any, but I'm going to give you my email to see what possibly we can do. Again, it's difficult, A, getting the fellowships, and B, as you know so well, getting anyone out of South Sudan and bringing them here. Not only in terms of a visa, which is a small problem, it's just the transport wise in terms of the cost of bringing them here. On the agricultural equipment, you know, we, not as Malaika, but as a farmer, I've looked into this in terms, it's impossible to export our equipment to Africa, as you can know. It's probably only South Africa that really has the equipment that would be possible, but increasingly Kenya. But you should take a look at, there's a lot of American companies in a group called AGRA, and the Corporate Council for Africa is all American companies working in Africa. And take a look at a listing of those and see which of those might be in maybe Sudan, maybe in Kenya and nearby. But Corporate Council of Africa is really a must for anyone interested in business on the continent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Scarlett?
I need to say hello, Natalie. It's so wonderful to see you.
Oh, so great to see you. It's been so many years.
I know, as a Jayhawk to a Cornhusker, my question was, what inspired your love of travel, Africa specifically? I know for me, it was being born in Kansas and wanting to see the world. And how can we come to your auction?
Oh, well, it's so great to see you. Well, the inspiration was family and mother. And, you know, when I was growing up, there was a map on the wall, and you better know where Malaysia is and where Canada is. And as a kid, we used to go to Mexico. My father, who was a farmer, loved bullfighting. I mean, of all things. My mother hated it, but we went to Mexico every winter. But you had to learn some Spanish. And then mother and my stepfather was a former governor, were agricultural advisors to what was then East Pakistan. So fortunately, it was a family that was international, but also we traveled in 48 of the 50 states. So you better know Nebraska. And then the big factor, which I give great credit to, is 4-H. And that's the college, it's the Ministry of Agriculture, it's our agricultural department that coordinates students and farm kids to travel internationally. So I went to New Zealand for 6 months. I learned how to shear sheep. And then I had a Rotary fellowship to India, and that did it. I said, I want to be an internationalist, but it's a great appreciation to my own family, my farm background.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Other questions? Well, I have one. And it's bison. It has to do with bison. While in Nebraska, I visited a bison farm that belonged to Natalie's cousin, who subsequently did very well in bison raising and sold bison meat to Costco, became a millionaire. But it's fascinating because at one point in the plains, there were no more bison. So they replenished the herd with bisons imported from Canada. an incredible project, and bison is emblematic of that region, right? It was.
Well, of course, I mean, bison is the crop of Nebraska and American Indians. So it's bison and corn. So it has a very important heritage background. I wish my cousin was a millionaire. He's not.
Not anymore.
No, he has a herd of about 800. But you know, there's a lot of tragedies in raising bison. A few months ago, 150 got out. And if you don't have really good fencing for bison, they leave. Now, you try to herd 150 bison, pretty impossible. He could only get back about 50%. So there's a lot of hazards on it. What I appreciate on it was its diversification of his own farm, to say that bison is definitely going to bring in more money. And if you went to order bison, we know where you can get some. It's a great meat. It's very, very healthy.
Very popular now.
I will add something, Malaika, a little bit of trivia. By 1900, almost all bison in the United States had been eliminated, because we know that there was a political agenda behind it in the late 19th century. Since bison were the livelihood, we call them buffalo here in the East, since bison were the livelihood of Native Americans, it was understood if you eliminate bison, then you will eliminate the Native American. And it was used as a political weapon against Native Americans in the 1870s, 80s, and by the 1890s, pretty much bison had been eliminated. And almost, and I know this for a fact, you can check it on Google, most of the bison out west that were replenished in the first quarter of the 20th century are all descendants from a group of bison shipped from the Bronx Zoo here in New York City. And that is, yes, and you can Google that.
Well, the story there is that they imported them from Canada.
Yes, that was later on. Yes, absolutely.
And
yes.
That explains their funny accents.
Good morning. Good morning, Frank from Dublin.
Good morning.
Ireland. Good morning.
Good
Frank.
morning, Gerard. Lovely to see you again.
And
We
food
miss
as
you.
a weapon, like the Irish and the potato famine. It's
Precisely the
terrible.
same thing. Yes, same
Yeah,
thing.
That's a complex story. I'm in New York at the moment, Gerard. So it's
Well, great. We'll have to meet up.
yes.
Good morning, George. Can I ask you one small question?
Of course, always.
Correct.
Thank you very much. It's a nice talk program. Just a question to Natalie. She says she was in India. Did you have ever chance to go to see yak farm in Himalayas in Nepal?
No, I didn't. I'm really sorry. But you know who is my great guru from India, Swaminathan, who is really an expert on farming. So I visited his farm in southern India, but I didn't have a chance. And I have been in Nepal, but I didn't have a chance to see that estate.
Yeah, it is really growing. Yak farming is a very popular, and especially the yak cheese is all over world exported also at this time.
And you think it has a potential for Nebraska?
It's a cold place, but I don't know what is the altitude of Nebraska.
Low. I don't know.
Low. Normally it is found above 6,000, 7,000 feet.
No, I don't think it would work. No.
Yeah.
But teff would work, you think? So what are you doing now with the teff, the Ethiopian teff? Because I know teff. I've lived in Ethiopia. What do you do with teff?
Malaika, teff is just such a delicious food, and I don't know, you've had a chance to eat the injera, haven't you?
Yes, oh yes.
It's very interesting about teff because it's the only country in Africa which has maintained its traditional crop. Every other country has imported so-called new and improved crops, which in most cases they have not been, because they've been coming in from either Europe or the United States.
Right.
Ethiopia has maintained teff. It is a major, major producer. It has one of the best nutrient values of any other crop, very high in iron. Look up the nutritional content of teff, and it makes this wonderful flat bread we call injera.
Yes.
And they roll it, and then you eat it oftentimes traditionally over a basket, but it's a very, very tiny, tiny seed. Now, the difficulty is that we don't have a harvester for it. So it's difficult to harvest, but it has a lot of potential and it's extraordinarily delicious.
Mhm. Injera is a type of a crepe.
It's the bread made from teff.
Yeah, exactly. And you fill it with meat or
With
vegetables.
a lot of lentils, a lot of vegetables, a little spicy in the meat, but it's a big assortment. And when you come back to Lincoln, we'll go to my favorite Ethiopian restaurant to have some.
Sure.
Mm.
So any more questions?
No question, may I? Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
I
Yes.
know this lady who's
Oh,
name
I am Bettina, and I have no question, but I want to say thank you to Natalie and express all my appreciation for all the work we have done together. And I arrived yesterday in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where we met many, many years ago. And thanks to you, we founded a group, the Harvard MIT International Women in Development Group. That's where we met Mary Hahn, who is here too. And later we met in Malawi in the context of the Project Gable. And that was a project supported by USAID. And it advanced basic education in Africa, in Malawi in that case. And the program included also a scholarship program for girls from Malawi to come and study in the United States. So your presentation, Natalie, brought back all of these memories. And I thank you very much for your presentation. And hello to everyone, and especially Mary Hahn in Washington. And it also brings back memories of coming to visit you in Malawi, and no, not Malawi, in Nebraska.
Nebraska.
Yes, and you remember we toured all the different areas, and we keep wonderful memories. And thank you very much for the presentation. We will be here at Harvard for a couple of days before moving on. So thank you very much.
Well, Bettina, thank you. What a joy to see you. You've been an international women's advocate and did so much for Malawi. And we were great buddies at Harvard, and it's remained
Yes.
for 30 years. So thank you for coming on.
Yes.
And back to Nebraska.
Yes. Bye.
Natalie, I want to add something that I know about Natalie. She adopted several children from Malawi that she has supported over the years with education. Can you say something about this, Natalie, your African family?
25 years ago, a very good friend of mine with whom I worked in Nigeria died of AIDS, as did his wife, and they had 6 children. And there really was no one to care for them. And so I set up a trust. And so now 6 children, 11 grandchildren, 4 I'm supporting in college. And they live in Zambia and South Africa and Malawi. But it's been a real joy to have my own kids and a lot of grandchildren.
Wow, that's unique. Thank you.
Well, Natalie,
If I may, I used earlier the word inspirational. Natalie is inspirational in so many different ways, And what she presented today is only maybe 10-20% of whatever she did and gave to the world. And if we want to name somebody an international person, an international citizen of the world, Natalie would be an excellent person to start with. Maybe we want to start with naming many people as international citizens of the world. We would start with Natalie. Thank you, Natalie, for what you have done.
I agree.
Very generous comments.
So, Andreas, I think that we have reached the, I don't know what you want to do now, but After this session, we have the International Civil Service Division meeting for 1 hour, and everybody is invited to attend. That session will be chaired by John German. John?
Before we, Malika, before we go, and certainly, Natalie, excuse me for cutting you off. I just wanted to say hello to Roberta Ranieri, who's from our sister club in Rome, Frank Kanatar, Padam, Nepal, Namaste. Stefan, wie ist heute alles in Nuremberg? I will certainly take up on your suggestion regarding today's program. Natalie.
Well, I want to thank you, and it's so marvelous to have friends, and your compliments have been so generous, but none of this could have been done without a lot of your support and support of the great Malaika team and our educators in Nebraska. But in closing, I think you should come to Nebraska. I'm interested in how many people have ever been here. I'm so glad that some have and our Nigerian links to Iowa. But what we will do, we will go to the Bison Ranch. We will go to the International Quilt House, which is the largest collection of quilts in the world.
Yes.
We will meet university educators. We will, of course, will meet with Rotary. And
the Museum of the Pioneer. Excuse me, Natalie. I was very impressed by the Museum of the Pioneer. And if you can, I mean, you can have seen movies about the pioneers in their big chariots, but you have to see this and how they lived. I mean, these are just incredible people who have opened those frontiers. I mean, the way they were living, the way their drive, it was incredible.
Well,
That museum really, of course, I liked the Museum of the Quilt, but the Museum of the Pioneer, they have artifacts, they tell a story. It's incredible. I think it's something that has to be seen. And of course, the unicameral system of governing, they have, of course, they have one chamber. How can you explain, Natalie? That was very unique in the United States.
Briefly, I'll say, but we're the only state that has a unicameral, nonpartisan legislature system in our beautiful capital, and it is very unique. But when you come, the first week of August is the Indian Festival, which is up in Niobrara, and that would be very, very interesting. And the cranes, if you come in April, we have millions of cranes that land along the Platte River. And then the 9th of July is the big African art auction down in Omaha. So come to Nebraska, let me know, my fellow Rotarians. But just in closing on my part, I want to say, what a joy, what a privilege it's been to be with you. And just continue doing all of the wonderful work that you are. Thank you.